Good afternoon, you crazy kids, and welcome to Liam's Library. Today, as promised, well, a couple of days after I promised, but we're getting there, it's time to continue on the night shift train, right? We're getting through these short stories by Stephen King in his first short story collection, Night Shift. We're getting through them. Looking back, Night Shift was the first book I ever picked up of his, now that I remember. I'll always tell people that the first book of his I read was It, when I was really, really little, when I could understand like maybe about 3 words out of 10. But because I knew the movie off by heart, I plunged through that book anyway. I reckon it took me about a year when I was, about 8 or 9 years old. I know that sounds like bullshit, but it's true. The second time I read It, I breezed through it, but the first time was a bit of a journey. But before that, my Auntie Deborah had a copy of Night Shift, and she lent it to me. And it wasn't this copy, it was the one with the children of the corn on the front and the guy going through the cornfield with the scythe, whatever it's called, or the sickle. And the first thing I did was flip it open and read Children of the Corn because I'd seen the movie. And I realised how different the short story is to the movie, how short it is compared to them stretching out that movie. The other day we talked about Jerusalem's Lot. We've talked about Sometimes They Come Back. Last year we talked about I Know What You Need. Today we're going to talk about The Graveyard Shift. Now, I saw the movie before I read that story. And the movie's the movie needs to be redone. The movie's fantastic as far as I'm concerned, but it's just really low budget and really corny. But we'll talk about the short story, and I'll have a couple of mentions about the movie because I am a fan. I am a real big fan. The movie's got Brad Dourif in it as this ex-Vietnam vet who just has some really weird things to say about what they used to do with rats and prisoners in POW camps. And it's pretty full on. You could tell, Brad Dourif, as usual, is having fun with the small role he was given in this horror movie. But let's get down to brass tactics, right? Let's talk about the story. It's the third story in here. No, is it? It's the second story in here. And it's called Graveyard Shift. Now, when I was doing the Jerusalem's Lot review, I mentioned rats, because there's a whole thing about possible rats in the walls. Now, if you've read the story Jerusalem's Lot, you'd realise it's not rats in the walls, it's like monsters. But this is about rats. This story is not supernatural. This story, I love this story, right? It shows you what you can do if you've just got a couple of really strong characters in mind and just put them in somewhere cool, some cool atmosphere, and fuck with them. So, it's about this college boy named Hall, right? You just get his last name. And this manager named Warwick or whatever. They don't really get along, right? And they work in this old cotton mill, right? So he's up on the top floor. It's, they're in Maine, 100 degrees, so that's Fahrenheit. I'm here in Australia, so we'd call that about 38, 40 degrees Celsius. That's about as hot as it gets. And you sweat, and you feed all this cotton into this big baler machine. But the thing is that pisses off Hall, this college boy, the thing he hates about this hot job, the money's okay, but what he hates about the job is the rats. Now, they line up around his workstation and they watch him with their beady black little oil drop eyes, and he'll peg soda cans at him. And the story starts with his boss walking up, Warwick. And his boss is like, "How you going, college boy?" And his boss always just calls him college boy. And there's just something about our main character, this guy named Hall. He's a bit of a badass, but the story's so short you don't really get much of a background on him or anything. He's just got a problem with his boss. He thinks he's a fucking real piece of shit, There's just something about him. And in his mind, he makes this connection that Hall and Warwick, there's something to do... Warwick and the rats. There's something similar about them, That's why, there's just so much scuttling and talking about rats that when he's thinking about his boss, he makes the connection between filthy rats and his boss. Now, on this day, his boss approaches him about work on the 4th of July. Now, it's a graveyard shift over the weekend, which means they'll be working from midnight till sunup, clearing out the basement level of this old mill. Now, this mill's been standing there for 100 years, So They get high pressure hoses and they got gloves on. There's about 7 or 8 of them down there and flashlights because it's dark and it's drippy and there are rats. And there's something about these rats, you know. So straight away, it's your normal Stephen King short story, horror story. They're not your normal rats. They're jumping out of bins. They're biting the shit out of people. People are going home with really toxic rat bites. And for some reason, Hall's just like, he gets right in there. He's like, no, let's keep digging further into this place. And he finds this trapdoor. Now, they didn't realize there was a level below the basement. And then he finds this trapdoor and opens it. And all you can hear is like the scuttling and thudding of all these tiny rat feet. And he's like, all right, we got to go down there. And the boss is like, yeah, you first, college boy. And then the college boy and the boss, Hall and Warwick, they just start to nearly have this punch up, right? And he's like, I'm fucking going down there. And he's like, well, pick your man. Who do you want to go with you? Warwick, the boss, says. And Hall, the college boy, is like, I want you to go with me. Get the fuck in that hole. And so they take this one other guy with them and they go down into this hole. And the light hasn't seen these animals for 100 years. So the rats are blind and they're bigger than puppy dogs. They're huge, right? And they've got this big high pressure hose that trails along behind them in the darkness. And they get further and further along. And his boss, Warwick, is breaking. There's a lot going on, man. Under there is fucking disgusting and spiders and all sorts of shit. It's a really uncomfortable read. And this college boy, you don't really get his motivation. Why the fuck is he going down there? Why is he pushing it so far? Why does he want to go into this rat's den and take the boss with him? But he just wants to prove this point. He wants to scare the fuck out of his boss. He wants to see his boss break. He hates this guy. Such a short story. There just doesn't really seem to be enough conflict for him to hate him that much, but he does. And so the other guy they take down, he's like, man, fuck this. When he shines the torch on a rat stands about that tall, it's got no back legs because of the no sunlight. They're mutating down there. And there are bats. And what's a bat if not like a rat with wings? But like Hall's like, keep going, Warwick. And they nearly get into this scuffle and he makes his boss keep going. And the rats start closing in all around them. They look around with the torch and they're just in this big circle and there's thousands of them. Fucking thousands of them, right? And the bats are roosting all above them. And Hall, the college boy, he just keeps pushing it like, let's keep going. And so they keep going and the rats close in behind them and start nibbling at the hose and the hose starts losing pressure. And suddenly, like he has a scuffle with his boss and Warwick, the boss, goes running off into the darkness and he hears this slap and a crunch and a scream and it cuts off. And then Hall shines his torch and there's a rat that's like bigger than me and it's blind and it's got no back legs and it's chewing on fucking Warwick. Like it's eating the boss. Like underneath they're so mutated. They're giant fucking rats. It's fucking horrifying. And they're miles away from the trapdoor, so, you know, Hall's like, fuck, I better turn around. And the college boy turns around and starts making his way back to the trapdoor. And then it stops there, and you get the people who are waiting for them at the top of the trapdoor. They're like, fuck, man, how long have they been down there? About 45 minutes? We should probably go down. It's like, yeah, all right. Get some gloves and some more flashlights and we'll go down. And so they start down into the darkness. The end. Hall and Warwick never come back, and then they send more people into the mill on the graveyard shift. And that's it. You know, they made a movie out of that. Out of like 14 pages of a short story, they stretched it out and made a cool movie where Brad Dourif is this weird vet and they've got this mill and they're doing it on the graveyard shift, but they end up finding this big underwater cabin and there is this big rat and he's got to battle it, and the movie's, you know, movie length. But if you want the real treat of Graveyard Shift, it's really just about the characters Hall and Warwick. And just their beef with each other. The rats and the monsters in the basement, they're incidental. They're part of the plot. But it's a character-driven story. And it's really fucking cool, but it's really gruesome. When I was a kid, me and my brother used to rent the movie, and my nan used to just freak out. She fucking hates mice, man. She hates mice, she hates rats. Used to freak her out to no end. So she used to hate her. She used to really, really hate her. And yeah, so I watched the movie 100 times and then I finally read the short story. And now, to get my fix, I'll always just read the story. It's a great story. It's Graveyard Shift, and it's a whole lot of fun. And that's about all I can say about it. I mean, I do give a fair bit away in these, but like I said, these were written in the 70s. So pick up Night Shift, give it a go. Yeah, if you just want a horror story, man, flip straight to Graveyard Shift, man. It's really short, it really packs a punch. And I'm going to read the next story, probably tonight or the night after. Oh, this stupid thing. And the next story is called Night Surf. And being where we are right now, in this COVID meltdown and everybody getting sick with the flu, Stephen King eventually wrote a book called The Stand about the flu wiping out the population. But before he wrote The Stand, he wrote a story called Night Surf. And it's in here. It's about a bunch of kids who are the only survivors after America gets wiped out by a flu. Excuse me. And the story's kind of really poetic and written really well, and it's not really about the flu. It's just about these kids and what they do with the end of times. You know, they just cruise around, they hang out on the beach, they get high, they get drunk, they fuck. And we'll get to that. Don't let me start talking about Night Surf yet, because I really, really, really like Night Surf. And after Night Surf is I Am the Doorway, and then The Mangler. So we got some wicked stuff coming up. So tune in next time for Night Surf by Stephen King, featured in Night Shift. And look after one another. Read some really great books and watch some great fucking movies. Like and subscribe and take care of one another. Goodbye.